Just, oops, it's not on. Just wanted to do a sound check. Can you hear me okay? Is it okay? Is it too loud or it's okay? How about at home? If you can't hear me well, please let me know in the chat. Welcome here and at home, wherever you find yourself listening. First of all, I wish you all I wanted to welcome you into the new year if you go by the Christian calendar. It's nice to see you all tonight. And it's a Wednesday evening, so it's a class on Buddhist mindfulness. I'm feeling like this is moving sort of strangely, but the microphone goes in and out. I can adjust it for a moment. Let's see. I think it might be my jacket, so I'm going to take it off. All right. It's always a new thing to be mindful about, so and how to react when something unexpected happens. So I'd like to speak about an aspect of mindfulness that the Buddha taught about a lot and as part of his 4 foundations of mindfulness, which is mindfulness of the mind. And I wanted to highlight one particular aspect about it, which is our beliefs, our views, and our belief systems that we often can hold on very tightly. And so what we believe to be true about ourselves and the world can be very limiting at times and deprive us of experiencing life more fully from a place of openness of heart and expansion, rather than a closed-mindedness and a contraction of the mind. So I wanted to speak about that a little bit this evening, and then also offer a guided meditation around it and come into silence together to practice. So our beliefs are, I was thinking about it, that our beliefs are kind of like filters through which we experience the world. So it's kind of like putting on a pair of glasses with a colored lens and then seeing the world only through that particular color that we're, the glasses that we're wearing. And I feel like a very vivid example of how that is sort of playing out in our country is how our country is becoming more and more divided around issues like immigration, abortion, LGBT rights, Black Lives Matter, and even what should or should not be included in American history books, in grade school, or up to high school, I should say. And so during uncertain times, such as the ones that we're living through right now, we tend to hold on more tightly to our beliefs. And as the world is undergoing these very rapid changes that have been occurring, not just since since the beginning of COVID, but for quite some time, or maybe sort of forever, but it just feels more highlighted in our consciousness perhaps right now, with immigration and the wars in Ukraine and in the Middle East, just to mention two out of so many others that are going on in the world. It feels like, and you might be in touch with that viscerally, that it feels like that there's a need, a heightened light, a need for safety and predictability that often gets shaken up when we cling very tightly to our beliefs. And I imagine that at least a few of us in this room, I certainly do, or have felt this way, struggled with this, is the example of the current war going on between Hamas and the Israeli government. And most of us very likely have aligned ourselves with one side or the other. Either we lament the atrocities committed against Israelis, or the bombings and mass murders on Palestinian territories. So it's really our strongly held beliefs in this regard that have divided us even further as a nation. And we either fear that Hamas will wipe out the entire Jewish state, or we feel that the genocide of Palestinians will wipe out the entire population of the Gaza Strip. So our strongly held beliefs keep us from seeing the whole picture of the conflict, how much suffering there really is on both sides. And if you think about it, it's really the same with our own interpersonal conflicts that we might have with family members or partners or co-workers or children or other important people in our lives. That we mostly insist that we're right and have a need to make the other person wrong, or can see, it's hard for us to see both perspectives, to see that both sides tend to be suffering in a conflict on a larger scale or on a personal scale. And so I've experienced at least that it takes a lot of courage and asks of us to be vulnerable and open to looking at how we too might have created harm for the person we're in conflict with, or the group that we're in conflict with or in disagreement with. And the same can be said about the Buddha's teachings. Opening more fully to the Buddha's teaching also requires a lot of courage on our part and a lot of acceptance even. And when we become aware of one of the crucial teachings of the Buddha of impermanence, or even that what we think of I or myself is in a constant process of change and unreliable really, that there's nothing we can actually hold on to, no ground to stand on. And I imagine that when we really experience that at a deeper level, that this can be quite frightening and disconcerting. At least that's been my experience at times with the teachings of the Buddha on non-self and impermanence. So really taking in the Buddha's teachings on aging, sickness, and death also is no small feat, if you think about it, or if you experience it really fully. The Buddha taught that the greatest delusion is to see everything and everyone around us dying and not really want to think about that the same fate is awaiting for us in the end of our journey, that we too will die in the end. And the Buddha pointed out that the only certainty we have is our own ultimate demise. And he didn't point that out to make us feel depressed or anxious, but he really just pointed to this truth of aging, sickness, death, and to be able to begin to accept the reality of that without pushing it away, but really coming in alignment with that as the truth of life, and to really take that in with a sense of compassion for ourselves and for the world. But since we don't tend to want to take in death as part of our ultimate experience, our fear around death really strengthens our beliefs. And so the example that I came up for this talk is that if I use, or I'm saying you as an example, I mean me as an example, if I use just the right anti-aging cream, I can cover up the aging process and I don't have to confront growing old and approaching death. Or if I lead a really healthy lifestyle and exercise and feel strong in my body, I don't really have to think about that one day my body will fail me in the end, regardless of all the efforts of, to fight aging, sickness, and death. And again, this was not a teaching to become morose about it, but it's just that, as Jack Kornfield always says, one of my teachers, we can jog the body, we can eat healthy food, and we can feel good about ourselves and feel energized, but it's really important to remember that in the end, everyone or everything that's born must eventually die, and we see that everywhere in nature around us. And it impacts us as well and our loved ones as well, ultimately. So mindfulness then really helps us recognize our beliefs, maybe even uncover subconscious beliefs that we don't know were actually there. How we were conditioned to view ourselves and how that can trap us in believing we're maybe even unworthy or not good enough. I think a lot of us feel that way if we dig deeper. Or even believing that we don't deserve to be happy. I think that impacts a lot of us as well. And there's even what I see sometimes, a risk in spiritual communities such as this one, or any other one really that you may pick, that with an emphasis of being of service to others and helping others, there can be a negation of one's own needs to the detriment of one's own well-being. And that's not to say, again, that it's not a beautiful thing to have compassion for the world and be of service in the world. But at least from my experience, I found that a lot of people just completely dedicate their lives to service, and they kind of do that from an empty vessel where they really haven't resourced themselves enough and have shown compassion to themselves enough to really have that service work come out of a wholeness within oneself. And what the Buddha actually said about it is that you can survey the whole wide world and not find anyone more deserving of love and compassion than ourselves. And I think with that, he really pointed out to the need to begin with ourselves in terms of offering happiness, offering loving kindness, offering compassion. That feels very important to mention. But it's important also to point out, though, that beliefs are not, negative or bad in themselves. They just really represent the messages we were given by society and the significant people in our lives: mentors, teachers, parents, caregivers, whoever they are, aunts, uncles. And so the more trauma, for example, we have experienced, the more pain beliefs will be present in us. Telling ourselves that our needs don't matter or that we don't have a right to exist are examples of that. And so what we believe really then begins to affect everything in our lives. If we have fear beliefs, we believe others are not trustworthy, or it's hard for us to form significant or trusting or loving relationships in our lives. So in order to heal from such detrimental beliefs, they have to be really brought into awareness. We really have to shine the light of awareness upon them. And through this type of mindfulness practice, we can shed light on our beliefs and recognize how certain beliefs create suffering in our lives. And in meditation practice in particular, we can recognize the negative impact of our beliefs, how they create dukkha, or suffering, or dis-ease in our lives. And we may then begin to ask some questions, or offer some questions in Buddhism called inquiry to ourselves, such as, what am I believing in this moment? How is this impacting how I feel about myself in the world? And there can even be a belief that we are bad for feeling a certain way. You might have experienced that around feelings such as shame or anger or anxiety that can make us even feel a little bit uncomfortable towards ourselves, and can trigger self-judgment and then even add to our pain that was already there. So place that on top of the pain that was already there. And as we begin to bring mindfulness to our beliefs and feelings, we can open to what is actually here in this moment. We may ask, what's it like to feel this in this moment? And this may help us to connect for the first time with a kind of soul sadness that underlies the anger, that underlies the shame, that underlies the fear, and begin to offer compassion to ourselves. And the Buddha taught often that the only response to suffering and pain is compassion. So again, in this way, our deeply held beliefs begin to lose their solidity. You might inquire in meditation, who would I be if I didn't believe this? If you're feeling stuck in a certain belief, or if you're feeling that a certain belief creates suffering in your being. Because it's only really when we let go of our beliefs that we can find out who we truly are and relate to the world and ourselves in new ways. So a long time ago, I remember that there was actually a story, I didn't hear it at the time, but I know this is a fact that the Dalai Lama, such a highly held, Buddhist monk and held in such high esteem around the world, he made a public announcement that homosexuality was a sin and against the traditional beliefs of Tibetan Buddhism. And he received there was an outcry afterwards, and he received a lot of criticism for these remarks by Buddhists in the Western countries. And so what the Dalai Lama did in response, he meditated very deeply on the suffering his belief created in others, and how holding on to this belief created suffering in himself as well. And then afterwards, he came out with a very strong statement that he was misguided in his belief on homosexuality, and he deeply apologized for it. So it feels that it can be good for all of us to reflect on how our beliefs about certain groups of people have contributed to dehumanizing them, how we may have even ended relationships based on how a person voted or felt about abortion, just to mention an example. And so the Buddha very strongly encouraged us to investigate even his own teachings, to see if they felt true within ourselves. And so basically to conduct our own investigation and experiment with the teachings, not just to take it in as a dogma, but really meditate on it and come and see, does this hold or ring true within our hearts, within our beings? And lastly, I just wanted to share the last line of the Metta Sutta, Metta meaning loving kindness. And so in this last line on the Buddha's words on loving kindness, it states that by not holding on to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, meaning the Buddha, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. And here, not being born again relates to no longer giving birth to views we then cling to and build an ego around. So as we let go slowly to our fixed views and opinions that we hold on tightly, we can then experience life as an empty vessel, or from a place of a more empty vessel, and we can flow with life more effortlessly and open more fully to the vastness of the ocean, the vastness of life. So I think that's already a whole lot of words, and so I wanted to just offer a meditation around beliefs and views this evening. And so we're just going to guide us through that, and then have some time of silence as well as part of the meditation. So if you just want to begin by closing your eyes, if that feels comfortable. If not, you can just feel free to maybe have your gaze downwards, just to see if you can still just offer yourself an inner perspective, an inwards reflection, or concentration rather, focus. And as you take your posture, maybe invite yourself to sit up a little bit more tall, feeling the heart center lifted and open. So just inviting a sense of alertness into the mind with a more open chest and a straighter spine. And at the same time, inviting your body to soften, to relax as best as you can in this moment. Sensing the parts of the body that are in contact with the floor beneath you, or with the cushion or seat that you're sitting on. And just sensing gravity to pull you down towards the earth, letting yourself be held by the earth underneath the ground. Perhaps just slowly moving your awareness up the spine, vertebra by vertebra, feeling each vertebra relaxing on top of the other as you move up, feeling a sense of relaxation through the spine. Allowing your shoulders to melt down in back of you. Your arms and hands resting easily. And your eyes and facial muscles relaxed and at ease. So take a moment just to sense the whole body as you're sitting here, or whatever other posture you've taken for meditation this evening. Connecting with your breath as your embodied experience. Just simply noticing the rise and fall of your breath as you're sitting here. Following the breath all the way in and all the way out. And just letting your breath to take its natural rhythm without controlling it or guiding it in any way, just allowing it to express itself moment by moment. And as part of this meditation on beliefs, see if you can sense a situation or belief that keeps you from experiencing freedom in your life. Perhaps a sense that you are not safe in this world, that you don't measure up to people's expectations, that you're not good enough, that you can't withstand all the changes in the world. Whatever is coming up for you in this moment. And see if you can include any related feelings, perhaps shame or anger or fear. What's here for you right now? Where do you feel it? Where do you sense it in the body? And just allowing whatever arises, whatever shows itself, to be here with a loving attention. See if you can investigate the core of the belief that's keeping you small. Words like, I'll never be loved, I can't trust my goodness, people don't like me. And ask yourself, when I'm experiencing, when I'm believing this, what's my experience like? Where do I feel it in the body? You can feel your throat, your chest, your belly. Just noticing how this is expressing itself in your body. Breathing it, breathing with it, allowing it, and holding space for it with a loving and caring attention. You may even wish to place a hand on your heart and that the loving touch of your hand accompany these difficult feelings like fear, like anger, like shame, or any other difficult emotion. And just sensing how this belief has impacted and affected your life, your relationships, the world around you. You may ask yourself, is this belief really true? It might feel real, but is it true? Whatever this belief, the Buddha reminds us that it's just a belief. It doesn't represent who you truly are or represent all this other person or group really is. It's not fixed and you don't have to hold on to it. It can be unlearned when you see clearly the selfless nature, just a belief, not me, mine, myself, not fixed. You're not bound by it. So we're just going to sit with this experience in silence, let everything be integrated, and just an invitation to be with a loving attention with whatever arises right now, be it sensations in the body, be it feelings, be it thoughts. Just let it all be here with a loving attention, trying not to get hooked into any particular experience. Just let it come and go, and allowing the breath to guide you very deeply through this experience in your meditation. So we'll have time to sit together for about 20 minutes. So just really make this your own experience now, knowing that you're also being held by the group at the same time. Thank you so much for your practice. It's very beautiful to see, to peek and see you all meditating. We have just 10 minutes, so I just wanted to see if there's any comments or questions or anything that you'd like to share on the topic. This would be the time. We're all teachers to one another. So. And also, if there's any questions from anyone online, I tend to forget to say that, but we tend to have, sometimes a question from people at home. And so please feel free to also write in the chat.
Have you had any personal experience where you had a thought that you meditated on and you noticed it changed and how fast did it change? Did it come back or?
Yeah, I feel that with thoughts, it's interesting, at least from my experience, it seems to be when one becomes aware of a thought, it sort of changes quickly or goes away quickly, whereas with like with body sensations and with feelings, it just tends to be where one can observe what's there, maybe sadness or grief or anger or, be it a body sensation, tingling or heat or swirling, we observe it, but my experience is that the thoughts, once you actually become aware of a thought, tends to go away or tends to shift. But you were saying something about beliefs.
Oh, yeah, more like with the belief, like, for example, other people cannot be trusted. Like have you any strong belief like that you sit with and then you notice change from your time?
I think that's really a process, isn't it? Because strong beliefs tend to come out of our conditioned experience. They tend to have been inputted to us by either the larger society or by important, significant people in your life. And so that often has become part of our inner experience, part of how we feel about ourselves or the world. So it's not necessarily something that can be changed very quickly. It's rather a process. And maybe it's more about observing how it can create pain or suffering for yourselves, how you might find yourself stuck in it or create an ego around it. That's what comes to mind. I don't know if that answers your question necessarily, but yes, sort of strongly held beliefs are like I'm not safe in the world, and that there can be a lot of reasons why one doesn't feel safe in the world, and it's not just say, I shouldn't feel safe, it's all wonderful, everyone loves me. It's not that easy. Obviously, there's a reason. I'm just giving this as an example. If a person doesn't feel safe in the world, there's probably a lot of experiences that they've had around it. So it's not to say all beliefs are wrong, like I said, if they match your experience. It's just sort of in mindfulness to see when we cling to these thoughts or when we build an ego around it, how they can create a lot of suffering. We can still act in the world around a belief or around needing to do something to make the society better, for example. It doesn't mean we just sit here and just everything whoosh goes away, but it's just an awareness practice, really. What does it actually trigger in myself? Do I cling on tightly to this belief? Like the example that I gave around the Dalai Lama, he had a very strong belief around a certain group based on his culture, based on his Buddhism that he grew up in, and yet he was able to sit with that in meditation and reflect on how that not only created suffering to a whole world, a whole group of people, but how it really, created suffering in himself. So that takes a lot of deep practice to be able to do that. So, yeah. For me, it was also recognizing in myself. I mean, it tends to be easier to see these strong beliefs in others, but then also to really sit and make yourself vulnerable. I know that I had that about people that voted for a certain person for president. And then I was seeing, oh my gosh, what I'm doing here is I'm actually also dehumanizing this group of people that I wasn't in agreement with, and just to really see how that applies to ourselves as well. This doesn't exist out there. I can't believe how this person is feeling that or acting like that, but also to, take a closer look at ourselves. Oh my gosh, I'm actually doing the same thing. I'm dehumanizing this group of people in this way with my own belief. So it just is more like taking a closer look at ourselves sometimes as well. That can be really valuable in that sense, in that regard. Yeah. Does anybody else want to offer anything about that as well? I'm not the only one that wants maybe to share about that. Yeah, John.
Well, I feel the understanding what's being said. That of course, we all view the world through our own belief system. Like last night we were speaking with we all have our rule book, and we believe their rule book or whatever it is on. So, but it seems also, and this could be, of course, because of my neonatal understanding of Buddhism, is am I then to have no beliefs? Is that the ultimate goal? Because no matter what I believe, and you can't assign a judgment to them, whether they be good or bad. Just having a belief will naturally cause suffering somewhere for someone. And then my question is that really my responsibility? Your suffering, my belief just happens to be my belief.
You mean your responsibility about who's suffering, like
your suffering. For example, the Dalai Lama, he had a certain belief, and I'm sure he was reflective and meditative upon that. He didn't just come across whatever that belief was haphazardly. He had to cause some suffering to some people, whether it was one or a billion people. So then he meditated upon it, and then having that belief or any belief, the natural have to apologize to everyone for having any belief, because certainly it will come to conflict, or someone will find conflict, and is that conflict or that suffering, is that necessarily my responsibility, or should I be attached? Well, does none of that exist? But then the goal is to have no belief whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't think that to be so. I think in Buddhism there's a distinction between sort of how we operate on a relative level in the world, how we still have to deal with one another, and there can be conflict, and not to think or say, well, it doesn't all matter. I don't care if this person was suffering or this belief really doesn't mean anything. And then there's the ultimate level where we can just all where it doesn't matter in the sense, but since we live in the world, we all do tend to have beliefs, and like I have very strong beliefs about social justice, and it's important to me. And to me, the practice is simply, am I feeling so strongly that I get sort of swept away by it and no longer can have a conversation with someone else that has other beliefs around it? Or can I still have an openness of heart and meet this person knowing that they suffer just like I do, and their beliefs probably stem from something that they were taught? And to me, it's more just to be vigilant about, is there any part of me that's like lowering this person, lower than myself, or where I'm dehumanizing that person, where because of their beliefs or because of my beliefs, I can now no longer see them as a fellow human being or have a conversation with that person. So that's sort of how I relate to it in terms of my practice. Yeah, and there's real suffering in the world created by certain beliefs, and just to be aware of that. And to me, it's always about being mindful. When I act a certain way, can that be harmful to another person, or is there harm that's being created? At least for myself, I want to be aware of that, especially when someone is telling me that they were hurt or harmed by what I said or how I acted. I would want to be aware of that, and if it's possible or appropriate, make an appropriate apology. That doesn't mean that I'm responsible for how everyone feels, but just in a interpersonal relationship, I want to be aware of my beliefs and my actions and how those impact other people, other groups of people, or people in my life. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think I hear you. I feel like in Buddhism sometimes there's this sense, well, if there's no self, if everything changes, nothing really matters anymore. But I don't think that's really the meaning of that at all.
But I think it's a natural conclusion of it though.
Mm-hmm.
Because regardless, if you have any belief, that belief will come in conflict with someone, somewhere, sometime.
Mm-hmm. Is there a particular example that you want to say, or no, just in general?
I think if you give an example,
Mm-hmm.
then the example itself can become a target.
Mm.
I think any belief. Like I said, I'm sure the Dalai Lama came, whatever his position was, I don't even know what it was. It's the first I heard of it. I'm shocked that he would even say something on the taboo subject like that. Regardless of what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But any opinion, any belief system will naturally come in conflict because it's taking a stance, it's taking a position, it's an absolute. And an absolute, by its own definition, has to be in conflict with something else.
Yeah, that's very true. So can we be more in the flow and not cling so tightly, to our beliefs?
And I thought of being long-winded with this, then not having a belief then, it will come to conflict, so then the response to that would be, I can believe anything I want, or anything I feel, and I'm justified so long as I can accept that someone else feels differently. And I don't think that's correct, because a belief system, I could say that people with green hair should not exist, but you can disagree with me. So therefore it almost gives credence to my belief, which, it's absurd, but you know my point. So that's, like I said, it's part of my vast lack of understanding.
I don't know that it's necessarily a lack of understanding. I think maybe meditate on it deeply and then come up here and sit here and talk to us about it. Because maybe you're onto something for yourself, and it might be helpful to just investigate that a little bit more in your own meditation. It's wonderful to sit with an inquiry and a question that you've just raised, and then just sort of see, well, let me sit with that and see what happens.
That's the answer. Thank you.
Okay, well, I don't know, maybe so, I don't know. But yeah, please do, and then come back to us and let us know. It's interesting what you've raised. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm very new to all of this. That was very interesting, that dialogue. Sorry. I was wondering how that might be connected to the idea, I'm studying a little bit the Eightfold Path and right speech. And I'm wondering if it's connected to that in some way, that let's say the Dalai Lama had this idea in his mind, but in in speaking it the way he did, and I never heard of this either until today. One of the interesting things, or things that I'm contemplating with right speech is, that how we deliver information, what is the intent? And if our intent is exclusion or non-inclusion kind of speech, that might cause some suffering. And I'm wondering if, when he meditated on it deeply, maybe he discovered that maybe it was a situation of it wasn't really right speech. I'm not too sure, but I'm thinking that I'm also struggling with this idea of how we communicate and what is our intent with our communication. And is our intent designed to bring people together, or is it designed to, push people apart? And maybe that's, even though we might say, well, it wasn't his fault causing the suffering of these people, the suffering happened. So it may not be about who's at fault, it's just, well, it happened. And it happened in response to what he said. So maybe that wasn't right speech, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, you're bringing up something very important in mindfulness practice, which is to be or become aware of your intent before you're speaking something. That in itself is a really beautiful mindfulness practice. What's our intention in what we're about to say? And it's often said that just right speech and being observant of one's speech, maybe even before we open our mouth, is just a beautiful practice in itself, that almost nothing else needs to be practiced. I mean, so could be said with the other factors on the Eightfold Path, but right speech is definitely a wonderful practice. And there's always this ongoing joke in the Buddhist community that someone was saying that he practiced right speech for a month and then realized that 90% of his speech was eliminated.
Yes,
So had to be
well.
eliminated. So, and maybe because they realized, oh my gosh, what was really my intention of saying this? Am I being divisive? Am I trying to insinuate something or create some kind of harm? Am I acting out of a trigger? It's a beautiful mindfulness practice to have around right
It's
speech.
kind of unsettling too, when I start to realize how much unnecessary speech, because I'm a talker. How much it impacts my inability to listen. And many times the saying, sticking your foot in your mouth, I'm definitely guilty of that multiple times over. So it's been really interesting watching myself on this, and I don't know, maybe he had a similar experience where he said something and not really realizing what it does on the other side.
Yeah.
I've certainly experienced that myself, saying things that later when I look at it closely, I'm like, wow, I wasn't really thinking before I spoke.
I think I've experienced that so many times myself, and I'm grateful you shared about that. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. So I think we need to probably honor everyone's time. We're already over 8 minutes, so I'm just gonna have Stephen come up, please, to share his beliefs. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
I believe it was a great discussion.
Yeah, that's very
Happy sailing.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve. I'm tonight's host. We opened the Dharma Temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They're simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for everyone with addiction. And our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 4:03 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website, and also it's posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. It's if you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and then bring it back whenever you're done with it. back there. For this evening, if you could just straighten your cushions before you head out, and windows are already closed, don't need to worry about that. Thanks for being here, and we wish you well, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. Have a good night, be safe.
Thank you.